Cool, so we're back in our comp. We've got some new renders to pull in here, so let's get in there and see what we got. So first, let's check out our cave. And so we're going to go up one version, version 10. So it's looking nice and clean now, which is great. And if we look through a little bit towards the bottom, we can see what we've got. Let that come through. Looking pretty cool. And we're laying our background image over that. And then we've got our fog laying in. This is all feeling pretty cool. So now our fog, we can go up 2 versions, and there we go. So that's looking sweet. We've got that guy, and then let's just trickle down through our comp and make sure everything's still working okay. And now I can start going in and really, I want to dial some of the pieces of this bird and really get in on some of these passes and play around a little bit. So to start off, I really want to modify the eye. So if I look at my render of my bird here, I can see what RGB matte the eye is coming through. So we've got red for the outside, green for the middle ring, and then lastly blue for the innermost part. If I wanted this bird to have laser eyes or something like that in the future, some crazy anamorphic lens flare shooting out of its eyes, I can use that matte, which is cool. So that's RGB matte 002. So it looks like I want to adjust the brightness of the innermost piece because it looks like it caught a kind of funky reflection. So I want to go in these passes so it is for sure purely in the reflection pass. It's even casting GI through our scene. So it's really this one right here. So I'm just going to create a grade node. And I'm going to grab that matte. So I'm going to start with RGB 002 blue. And I'm just going to gain that down a little bit. Not a ton, just a bit. And I always want to make sure I've got a pipe going into the bottom. And for the time being, I'm going to turn off my lens distortion so I can really easily flip back and forth. And now I'm going to create another grade node, and this one is going to be that green channel. So let's do our RGB 002 green, and let's just dial that down really low real quick. There we go. So that's kind of the result inside the camera lens. And so I can get in there and darken that down, and that will help give me a little bit of that contrast. So you can see there's the innermost part of the lens reflecting some blue, and I might even want to dial that down a little further. I'm not sure. I kind of like that it has a bit of difference to it, but you know, just like I said, the goal here is really contrast. So you can experiment around with this. And then lastly, I'm going to again use my RGB 002 red, and on this red, something must have messed up something here. Let's delete that. Let's try this one more time. I think I must have done unpremult. So let's do RGB 002 red. And yeah, so now I can experiment a bit with adjusting the colors on this thing all at once. You know, doing some little like subtle gamma shifts and that kind of thing. But you can see I have to be really careful with it because I don't really want to do a lot. It's just really the really fine-tuning kind of stuff. And this is a little bit weird too. You know, as you really start looking at this stuff, you start wondering what actually happened in there. You can see there's that like black shape that's either getting reflected or something. And I might just need to paint that out for the time being until I can figure out what caused that. And you can see the directional blurs on the background are taking quite a while, and I've also got that big photograph and everything. So this is a good time. You can, it's also right note in here is a little bit of a pre-comp. And you can just, you can get this loaded up. And so we can just make a pre-comp folder here. And then I'll just make a folder for background. And I'll just call this pre-comp, or sorry, we'll call it BG pre-comp version 1.exr. And it's probably a good idea to put a frame padding on it just in case, but and that just kind of prepares me for potentially needing a frame count in the future. And I'm just going to write all channels into this thing. Actually, we probably don't even need to do that, to be honest. Yeah, it looks like it scrapped all of them anyways, so it's not a huge deal because it's not bringing any of those channels over into the main one. So we'll just set this to RGBA. And this EXR, what we can do, so if we just hit render selected, we can set this to read the file. And I would have thought that it was in there. Oh, so it's frame 1. So I can actually, so because the frame padding is actually doing a bit more harm than good right now, I could have loaded that in, but I'm just going to render that one more time. There we go. So now I'm rendering a still and I just have this read file. So this is kind of a nice little way to do a pre-comp. And if I turn that off, it should just trickle up through the rest of the comp. But I'm going to keep that on. So that'll help my calculation time, especially as I'm getting a little deeper into this thing. You can see now if I go in and I flip some of this stuff off and on, it's reacting much better. Whereas before when I was, needing to get in here and work on this thing, it was a little difficult to deal with. So one of the really weird areas is this that's really bugging me right now is this reflection. And so I'm actually going to choose to just toss a quick paint node on this. And the paint node in Nuke is just a clone stamp. And I'm going to make sure that my paint is happening on frame 1. And I can just say clone. And I can lower this size down, maybe really small like that. And I'm just going to, just for right now, I'm holding control right now to bring that clone brush over. And, oops, let's look through what we're painting. There we go. So like I've been saying this whole time, we have a lot of leeway with this because it is a still. And so I'm embracing that. Normally I would want to get in there on the render and polish this up. And if you're ever in a production setting, you're absolutely going to want to get in there and polish this kind of stuff up. I have a feeling this was something to do with the ray depth, but because I wanted to show the workflow of the image for the video, you're getting to see the whole process of me really kind of dialing in this comp as I go. So what I'm going to do is get this all set up, and you can see I'm trying to leave a little bit of that black line because it's kind of nice. It helps outline it just a little bit, and it's looking pretty good. So I'm going to set my hardness to 0 now, and I'm going to just get in there and do that last little bit. What I want to do is I just want to group this paint. So it's already grouped inside of our root folder here, so I'm just going to call this paint. Oops, capital A, get rid of that. And now I can just dial that opacity down a little bit. So it just kind of adds, you can see the before and after here. It just brings a little bit more detail. It feels like it's actually reflecting something and not just getting in there. And I don't know what actually caused that yet. So just our quick little fix it. And we'll get rid of that. So that's pretty cool. And now let's bounce back. So that feels a little bit better. And maybe I could even, I could dial it up a little bit. So cool. Slowly but surely getting there. So another area that I really wanted to kind of mess with here is the designs on the bird. And so I wanted to see what pass those were showing up in the best over here on the, so I was hoping it would be in the specular, which it's not. It looks like it's going to be in the reflection. Cool. So what I want to do here is first isolate out the wings, and I want to add in another version because I just want to pop that out a little bit more than I was able to get. I really like what's happening in the wing, or sorry, in the tail, and I want to get that up into the wings as well. So same type of deal here. I'm going to look to my top level and find that RGB matte, which I believe is, there we go. So it's the red channel on that. And what I can do is just shuffle out. And we'll bring this over here. So I'm going to shuffle out my reflection pass. And I'm going to create a postage stamp node since I'm kind of creating a little sidebar thing here. And this postage stamp I'm going to bring up, and I'm going to set that to shuffle out my RGB matte. Actually, it was 4. So I have a visual cue here of what's going on. And on this shuffle, I can go to my node and I can say hide input. And actually, sorry, I don't even need I forgot about this. I don't even need the postage stamp. I can just use the shuffle here. So now I can get in and I can use this as a mask if I want to or whatever. But I like to use this to just kind of pipe stuff around. And it'll give you a nice little update of exactly what you're looking at here. So there's our red channel. And oops, I just totally did the wrong one here. And this one, there we go. So yeah, so I can get in here and I can use that as a mask. And I'm going to grade this around a little bit and see if I can isolate that area. So it's kind of interesting. And then I'll press C for a color correct node. Maybe I'll desaturate that just a little bit. And now I can try just adding that back on top. And so we can set that to plus. And I can turn that off and on. And for some reason, it's not even really doing that much. Maybe I actually need this to be a little bit brighter than I originally thought. But what I do want to be careful with, though, is that it's going to potentially blow this guy out. So I'm going to use a quick roto shape. And I'm just going to give myself a little curvy shape. And I'm holding control to pull these points out. And then I can make that the mask of what's getting added on. So that's only going to add those in right there. So all that work just to bump that one little bit of detail out. And now we've got some work to do with figuring out the color there. Everything's feeling a little washed out all of a sudden. That's, I was wondering. Threw me for a loop. I hit my gamma slider and I didn't pay attention. I don't even know when I did that. You'll probably laugh when you're watching this video and say, that idiot just hit the gamma slider. He doesn't even know it. So anyways, so we can get this dialed in nicer. So, I just went in and I cranked that up a little bit more. And finding that sweet spot is always a challenge. That's pretty cool. I like that. Awesome. So another little sweetener that I want to do is get some chromatic aberration on here. So the trick with this, I actually, a really quick, easy way to get some nice chromatic aberration. And again, I highly recommend searching around the internet and getting yourself a nice plugin to do this, which sounds silly, but there's a massive community built around Nuke, and there's amazing plugins that you can purchase, like Sapphire or whatever, and they have built-in tools to do this kind of stuff that are amazing. Um, there's also on Nukepedia, there's tons of free downloadable gizmos and stuff that you can use for this. But I want to show you kind of just a quick and dirty manual way to do it that I got off of a video on the internet myself. And really great technique. We can just use a God rays node here, and I can set it to only do the red channel. And you can see if we look through this, and we right now we have our God rays at the dead center. And if I set this to like 1.1, you can see what it's doing. It's a very nice and pretty soft effect. And this is obviously way too high, but we can start just scaling this down until we're happy with it. So probably somewhere, maybe around in there. And you can see if in here, these edge pixels are pretty nice. And the trick here is you want to apply it above your film grain. You can see if I turn that off and I just paste it, let's just paste it down at the bottom here. You can see that it's smudging the grain and it's not really working right. I really like seeing the grain run through it. I feel like it keeps it feeling pretty natural. So that can be your red. And then you can actually duplicate this. And the second one, we can actually lower to below 1, and we can try a different channel so we can see what the green looks like, or we can see what the blue looks like. And the blue is a pretty normal feel to chromatic aberration. If you look at reference photography, you can get a good idea for it. I like this too in the scene because it's just it has this movement to it, and you know it does really help just kind of sell this idea a little bit better. So you can see it's actually more subtle over here, which is interesting. I would have expected a little bit more, but you can see before and after definitely has a little bit of a shift. And so, you know, again, you could see what it looks like with green and blue, or you can just do one channel at a time. The green actually looks kind of nice. So purely style. There's really nothing else, no other purpose to that except for trying to bring a little bit of realism into our scene. Something, you know, something to just help out a little bit and bring us more to a photographic world, right? It's really easy with these full CG images to just go, oh, that looks fake. But when you have these little small, you know, nuances of photography mixed in, it can help a lot. And so the combination of like the stuff we're doing with the lookup table, the small things like grain and chromatic aberration are kind of a given with most things of this nature. But, you know, if you don't put them in, then it's not going to help. So, and cool. So we can keep going here. I'm actually starting to get pretty happy with this. The main thing that I really want to get, though, I talked a little bit before about getting some particles of some kind in here. And I don't really mean actually doing any particles. I'm just going to find some sort of, you know, image of snow on black that I can place over the background and add the same directional blur to it and add a little bit of depth of field to it. And generally just try and get something to make it feel like there's dust in the air or something like that. Cool, so I grabbed some stills from some QuickTimes of just footage that I had. So you can see there's like some smoke, some particly stuff. I grabbed a couple different particly bits so that I can bring in 3 layers and have slightly different depth of field on each one. For a kind of far away mid-ground that's a little bit more in focus, and then something that can be out of focus that's closer to camera. And first I'm going to start with layering in some, you know, kind of dusty particle looking things over top of the background. And so I'm going to want to, I'm just going to add these in. So and I'm going to do it after everything in that comp already. So I've got A, B, and C, and I can actually even reuse each one again for kind of 6 layers of depth. Because if you look at it, there's not really much going on. And there's a little bit of a cloud element. That one's got something defocused, which is cool. That'll help us even more. And then this one's perfectly sharp. So I can even see what these all look like. Going in there. So you can already see it's kind of a nice effect. I totally like it. So what I'm going to do is layer these all up together first so that I can, so let's get these lined up. And let's give ourselves a little bit of room to work in case I want to have more than one. And so we'll get these guys all put together here. We'll just set them to plus. And I can immediately right off the bat here. So we've got 1, 2, and 3. So this one, because it's already got the little defocused bit, I might just leave that as is. I'm going to duplicate A, and I kind of like, I don't know, I just like the feel of A as is. So I'm going to leave that one as well. And then I'm going to go ahead and start my defocusing. So I'm putting these two together, so I'll probably leave them sharp. And then I'll have these ones layered up with different variations of defocus. So let's just use a defocus node, it's nice and fast. And we'll start with 2. And then we'll do a 4. And then 6. And then lastly 8. And you can see anywhere I've got a duplicate, so that's A. So I'm just going to actually rotate this 180 degrees. So it's a different image. And then we've got 2 C's as well. So just rotate one of these 180 degrees. And so that 2 pixel defocus, oops, I didn't, there we go. That's what I'm looking for. This 2 pixel defocus is really pretty subtle. So maybe I want to start with 4 and work my way up. So why don't we try that instead? You can already see how we're starting to get this really nice amount of depth. So this 6 one, maybe we can try 12. And then this last one on the end. So which is nice because that's a subtle one anyways. We can put the 16. And that's cool. So we'll get some nice shapes going. I can probably replace these defocus nodes with our with our same Z defocus that we're using up here as well. Because I left that as disk also. So that's not a big deal. So we can see what we got here. And it's definitely giving us a nice effect. So let's go ahead and get this added in. Don't know what happened. Oh, sorry. This merge node is. I'm sitting here waiting for it to load, and it's like I'm loaded. I'm ready to go. Cool. So this is working. So what I can do is start figuring out where certain particles are going to be, because I probably want to have some that land in front of the bird. So maybe this one right here. So let's pull this apart. And we'll move this down. So that one can be in front of the bird. And also any of these ones that are, so both of these as well will be in front of the bird. So I got them all set up together over there, but because I want to have some in front of the bird and some behind, I'm going to need 2 sets of them. And it looks like I broke that, so I need to make sure I re-render. There we go. So you can see there's this little checkbox here for check that file matches input. So that's what was going on there. And then now this one right here, we can set the plus. Cool. So now we're starting to get, you can feel that there's little dusty bits in the air. And let's look through towards the bottom of our comp and see what that's looking like. And now we can play around with getting some motion blur on those as well. And I think I'm going to grade them up a little bit. Maybe desaturate them. These ones that are in front of the bird are definitely harder to see, but I don't want it to be too overpowering here. So that's cool. So these ones behind the bird, so let's just turn off that read file temporarily. So we'll let that propagate down through. Cool. And let me crank this up a little bit. Nice. It's actually looking pretty cool. Maybe I do want to have a little bit more of these. Maybe I want to have this one in the foreground cranked up a bit as well. I liked where that one was at. Okay, so this one though, the background particles, this is actually becoming much more involved than I intended. Who knew? I guess that's always how these things go, right? So let me get this organized here. So what I wanted to do with these background ones is make sure that they are not reacting with anything that is within a certain depth range. So I want to clip them. So I'm actually going to utilize my depth pass that I've kicked out in this. And so to do that, make sure I still have all my channels down here. So hopefully we have a depth pass. We do. And this dir blur, I'm actually going to copy. I'm going to set this new one, which is dir blur 3. I'm going to set that to do the depth pass. And now I'm actually just going to bring this off into its own little world here. And actually we can put it up there so it's not getting double. I'm only dealing with the depth pass here. I'm going to shuffle out the depth. And let's check that out in RGB. I actually I can just leave that as is. I can just put a dir blur on it, so that'll probably work a little bit better. So anyways, what I'm getting at here is I'm going to use a grade node. I'm going to establish a black point and a white point. So my white point will probably be around 250. And then my black point can be like 200. And so you can see I'm immediately able to clip off the bottom of that rock. And I've remapped this whole image, and I can turn on my white clamp. This does have an alpha. So I can actually just go in here and I can create a constant for myself that's just white. And I can layer this underneath. So we can set this merge node to under. And whoops, I'll have to figure that out. So let's see if we do a disjoint over. And let's swap that. So I'm not sure what's going on there. Maybe if we, okay, so we'll do that. And then we'll do our dir blur. So that was, the directional blur was just not playing nice with the way those were layering up. But cool. So we've kind of created a nice little mask for ourselves. And all of that work was really to just connect in there. And you can see that if we set this mask input to red, it's clipping off the bottom of those particles so that they're feeling like they're actually behind us right there. And then these other particles can land in the foreground a little bit. But there aren't really any. So maybe something else I could do is take this sharp set of particles, and because I feel like there's a lot. So let's leave that one. Figuring out where these particles are going to go is kind of tricky. making sure that you have an even amount through the depth. So we've got that one and that one, which are not getting blurred at all. So if these are going into the background, I probably want to blur these quite a bit. And let's do one more here, and we'll just set this one to like 16. So that's kind of cool. So now that feels like they're a little bit further away. And let me just see exactly where we're at here. 10. It's kind of interesting. So that's kind of cool, because those are going to get blasted by the background as well. And I can also go in and adjust my depth as well. So I could bring my white point further down, and you can see that I will let some more of those particles fall in there. So that actually feels better. That feels like those are more integrated into the background. So this one, I wonder if we even set that to like 32. Oh no, that was actually a nice amount of detail. So that's kind of cool. Okay, so the background's sorted. So I'm liking that. What I want to do though is grab probably, let's see, so we've got C, C, and B. So I want to grab one of the A has a lot of detail in it. So I'm going to grab an A and layer that in as well. And A has already got two, one of which is rotated 180 degrees. So I could put a transform on this, and I could scale it negative so it's mirrored and rotate it. So we can do 180 degree rotation, and then we can set this scale to -1. So that should be pretty different. So we've got that one, and let's make sure this is different to that one. Yeah, so that's cool. And go down to the bottom of our nuke script here. Oh, interesting. So somewhere along the way, I broke my alpha, which you can see right there. And so I have a feeling it's this guy right here. So on this merge node, it's trying to add the alpha. So I can just uncheck that. And there we go. So now we're not affecting the alpha at all. And so we've got some particles happening again. And over here on the foreground bird, I do feel like it's, So it's always just a balancing act, huh? So let me turn this one off. So this is the one that's too busy. So maybe we should just turn off. I think it's this one right here. Yeah, that one's too much. We'll just leave that off for a split second. And now let's go down to the bottom. Yeah, that feels nicer. So you can see there's some little bits that are happening that are feeling nice. And then there's some more defocused bits as well. And I think that the color grade I did, having this so intensely high, is throwing me off as well. And then the last step to get this kind of balanced a bit is take my Blur, and let's try pasting that in there, but with a lower length. So we don't need to do, the same intensity, maybe just like 5. And then we can do the same thing on our foreground here, just to give them that same bit of motion through the rest of the scene. So yeah, it's pretty cool. And that's looking through the LUT. So it's looking pretty interesting, kind of cool. I definitely feel like I'm missing an element right here, but that can be saved for another day. Like I want some sort of either snow pile. A snow pile would be pretty cool to kind of match up with what we've got going here. This kind of wintry bits, as it may be, like a little bit of snow right here, I think would be a nice, a nice look to it. Because we've got our bright bird, and we've got the bright spot over here. That could be kind of nice. But cool. It's feeling pretty great. There's a million things that I still want to do to this, but it's feeling pretty nice. So I'm going to take this over and figure out a quick lens flare. quick little section here. So I was just talking about wanting to put some snow piled up here, and I would love to do that in CG, but just for the time being, I did go in Nuke here, and I was just fiddling around with it, and I didn't record it, but I'm going to leave you the nodes here, and I'll walk you through it real quick. So I've got my snowy rock texture that I'm using a Luma key node to pull this alpha, and then pre-multiply it so that I can isolate only the snow, color correcting it a little bit, cropping it down, transforming it. If you look, you can see it's actually pushed way over to here now. It's getting layered over top of the image. And then I'm multiplying the lighting pass through it, so that you can see there's those like highlights now. And so this is where things got a little weird. This roto that you see is actually two shapes, and I kind of pseudo created a depth pass for myself. So you can see I've got a ZD focus here. The focus point is set to 0, so anything in black will be in focus and anything outside of it will not be. And then you can see that's the result of that. So that we get some areas in focus and some out of focus. And then I am layering that back over top. And so it's these two roto shapes here that are controlling where that's going. And so I obviously could have painted this very easily in Photoshop, but the disadvantage to doing that is that I do not have the ability to very easily go back and do things like move these roto shapes around, change the focus, or completely just swap it for a different texture if I want to. So that's the beauty of Nuke. And since I know I'm probably going to continue to work on this past the creation of this video series, I wanted to get it in there. So cool. So that was kind of a little interesting experiment that worked out pretty well. So I'm going to go ahead, and that's actually, you can see, that's what it ends up looking like at the end. So that was really what I wanted. In theory, eventually I want it to be kind of piled up, but it's kind of nice to just have that. Compositionally, it's, I think, really what helps. Because the background is intentionally fairly abstract. It's kind of nice to just have that some subtle kind of shape in there. You can see our before. Let that scan line kind of trickle down here. The before, and then what it looks like after. So it's a extremely simple, subtle thing, but it's just kind of nice to have it in there. So our finishing touch is just going to be the flare, and then that's going to be the end of this video series. So I've got some video of myself creating this lens flare, playing back, sped way up, and actually edited down as well, because I spent probably way too much time fiddling around with this thing. It just was a gigantic chunk of video. I feel like in the end it's going to be better for you to actually go in and just kind of look at the nodes. But one of the key things that I'm doing in this, you can see right there, I've actually connected, so holding control and dragging that animation slider from one kind of root flare node to all of the rest of them, so that the position is maintained for all of them. And this makes it so that I can change the position on one of those flare nodes, my master one, and it will propagate to all of the rest of them. And so a lot of this is, I have some reference open, and I'm looking at stuff, and you'll find in the Nuke script there'll be a anamorphic version, and Nuke has a little anamorphic slider that kind of squashes stuff, which is cool. And then there's also going to be just the regular one. So you can play around with both. I have mixed feelings about Nuke's flare node. It gets really cool results. I always have way better results when I do these flares in Cineon space. So that way they're, I don't know if they're intended to be that way, but they just have this really, really beautiful, I guess, like fall off in the colors and everything. And a lot of what I'm doing in this also is not just balancing the brightness in these flares, but balancing the color as well. There's the chroma shift slider in Nuke, which will go in and you can really quickly tint your flares either cool or warm. So in the end, I went with a fairly stylized flare, and I wasn't worrying too much about matching something totally real. And I was pretty happy with it. It was a lot of fun. So going in and, like there I went in and named everything so I could keep track of it and go back and modify everything. But it ended up working out really nice for me. All right, so we're getting pretty close. The reason I connected this to this main guy here so that I can go in, and if I'm looking at, say, this fog, you can see that I didn't quite get that position correct. So I can move that one, and it's going to stay linked to everything, and it will change the position of those flares so that they're coming from that right spot. Now that kind of matches up with the feeling of the fog a little bit better. So yeah, it's feeling pretty cool. I think I'm really starting to get into that nitty gritty as it is. Like I think I want to lift the background a tiny bit just so that the blacks are kind of right. So see how it makes that feel a little further away in the distance, which is what I wanted. And now I can set my white point a little higher as well to help just kind of neutralize that a bit. So you can see it's still lifted, but yet the white point came down. And maybe even if so one of the real issues I'm having with the comp here is the way the fog is reacting. So you can see in the fog right there, I've got that really intense bright spot. And something that was kind of interesting was in this version of the fog over here, if I turn this main fog that we initially created off, let's look down at the bottom of our comp. So that's with no volumetric. And you can see the brightness that's happening around the sun is interesting. It's kind of cool. So you can see I've got quite a bit of stuff turned off here. Let's turn some of the stuff back on. So because I have this nice flare now, I don't really need any of that glow that I was working on. So in the final version of the comp, that's not going to be in there. If you want to play around with that, that'll be in a previous version. That'll still be with the work files. So you can see if I turn on the volumetrics on that node, it feels okay. But I'm definitely going to have to, I kind of like the look of this other one if I can get that edge resolved. And so to do that, let's connect our mask in. Cool. So that's kind of an interesting feel because it's very harsh. I killed a lot of the contrast in that version. It just has a very different feeling to it. And one of the nice things about it is really the soft clip. So we'll turn that back off and we'll see what happens if I start neutralizing with a soft clip some of these values. So I'm going to set this to logarithmic compressed to mimic that log curve. I can start pulling that down. And now when I do that over, you can see it really, like if I turn that off and on, it will help cut back on that. And I think it'll let some of that lens flare poke through instead. It's kind of interesting. And maybe even I can turn some of the volume back up because it doesn't have as extreme. Oh man, so you can see I'm kind of, that's kind of cool. Maybe a little too high. Maybe we can dial it back down a little bit. I feel like I'm getting a nicer fall off around where that main light source is happening, which is cool. That's really what I wanted. So cool. I am feeling pretty good about this. I was able to take care of all of the little stuff in Nuke, so I'm not even going to bounce over to Photoshop. I'm just going to wrap it up right here. And there it is. So it's always very difficult to be feeling like you're totally done with a piece of artwork. And this one definitely still has quite a bit of work that needs to go into it. But for this image and for this look development, I'm feeling really happy about it. And to me, look dev is not only, textures and shaders and all of that, but as the words mean, developing the look, especially on personal work like this, figuring out the entire feeling of an asset in this way is an extremely beneficial part of a workflow. And so depending on where you're working, that may or may not be part of it. Some places it'll only be shaders, some places it'll only be textures, and they may still call you a look dev artist. But generally speaking, it's one of my favorite things to do, and it's a ton of fun. You're really getting to take something and, getting that model and making it look as amazing as you can, and seeing the results go through other artists or pumping through shots or whatever. It's a really great feeling. So I hope you're able to go forth and utilize V-Ray, make some amazing stuff. So thank you for all the support, and thank you very much for watching.